Hey, Uncle Pete. I wasn't going to jump on quite yet, but then I saw you putting a comment in there about Bandbox, and I was like, oh, might as well jump on right now. I'm just kind of sitting here. So, first of all, hope you're doing well this evening and staying safe and healthy and all that jazz. But to answer your question about Bandbox, I actually quit getting Bandbox some time ago. Um, so, yeah. Yeah, I quit. I quit on Bandbox like 6 months, maybe more ago. I just decided I didn't really want to have another box that, I was just getting stuff. And if I'm going to get things, I want to like pretty much everything. So that's why I'm still doing Fright Crate, because Fright Crate, I definitely still really like the stuff. Is everything sounding okay with the audio? Just let me know. Is it like too high, too low, echoey? I hope the echo thing doesn't happen again. Is there Ringu replica tape? Oh. Yeah, that sounds not cool. A Ringu rep. That's the thing. Like, their prop replicas for me just were such misses. So as long as I was getting like a really good pin and a good art print, that's what I was in it for. And then they started having problems where like they weren't even doing art prints anymore. They were just taking still frames from the film and then doing like some like graphic design stuff over it. And I was just like, that's not what I'm looking for here. But the pins were always good. Like, they never had... Although I hated how, like, for the variants of the pins, they were just doing color variations, and they all would look the same. I liked when they would do a whole different design for the variants. Sounds great. It was a joke, threw it in the trash. I know. I've gotten so many things from Bandbox over the years that I just threw in the trash. Like, the biggest thing for me was, like, those, like, missing papers that they did, and they did that like 3 separate times, and I was just like, what is this crap? Greetings from Virginia. Blue Room, what's up, buddy? I'm in it for the pins, but it's not worth it anymore. Yeah, I know. Fright Crate's worth it, although I have to warn you, you have to remember to buy Fright Crate within like the first 2 days of every month. I forgot for April, so I'm not getting in April Fright Crate, unfortunately. I missed that window, and then by the time I remembered, it was like a week later, and I was like, oh, maybe they still have some. Nope. That sells fast, and it's limited, so unfortunate, Yeah. Hopefully we get a good amount of other people in here. And actually, just so you guys know, I decided to partake in some adult beverage this evening. I know it looks like orange juice, but it's a hazy IPA. Not my favorite style, but I happen to have it, so that's why I'm drinking it. So if you guys are drinking anything, even if it's water, cheers. Set myself a reminder on the Alexa. I do it on the first of every month. Yeah, that's smart. I usually set a reminder on my phone, but I wish it was a recurring thing where you could set it to the first of every month instead of having to like physically go in and create a different one for each first of each month. But I just can't. Like, it just doesn't do that. I'll be right back. I'm going to change the temperature in here real quick. Sorry about that. Had to keep it comfy for the stream, especially since I'm drinking beer. It's going to heat me up more. Jacob's Ladder 2019, 1.5 stars. It came out? I didn't know Jacob's Ladder came out yet. My wife just opened a bottle of wine. Think I'll grab a glass. Yeah, do that. I like wine too. Color Out of Space, not as good as Mandy. Okay, I'm interested to see what I think of Color Out of Space. I should be watching it within the next month or so, I think. I've heard really good things. I didn't really like Mandy a whole lot. Eventually I'll do a review video for Mandy, I'm sure, but I'm staying away from it at the moment because I know people are going to be like really disappointed when I tell them my opinion on that film. Although, maybe on a second watch I'll feel different. I'll keep my mind open. Heather, what's up? How are you? Doing all right? Staying safe? Staying healthy? Are you drinking currently? Because I'm having a drink. I'm hoping Color Out of Space is as good as people say. Although I know, obviously, for you, Blue Room, it was a miss, but I felt like Nicolas Cage energy had to be bottled up for this movie. I mean, he is an energetic dude. Like, you can't contain the cage. You can't cage the cage, pretty much. That guy is something. I mean, that one scene, I did love the one scene of him in the tiger shirt and his underwear in Mandy where he's just, like, screaming in the bathroom. Like, that's amazing. And I know everyone likes to cite the whole bees thing from the Wicker Man remake. I haven't seen it just because I don't feel like I need to see a remake of Wicker Man. I love the original. So, doing good? Good, Heather. I'm doing well. I'm doing fine. Been working from home. I'm actually okay. I'm kind of an introvert anyway, so just being at home all the time is kind of what I like. So this hasn't impacted me in too terrible of a way. Although my wife, it's kind of hard for her sometimes. So, and I'm sure for a lot of other people, I get it. Especially if you really like to go out and do things. One thing I do really miss is running around and trying new breweries or different breweries I haven't been to. So, the movie is in production. Check out the title. Okay, I can do that. The true tale of old Splitfoot versus the lesbian warrior nuns of the Great White North. That's a movie title? Because I'm in. If that's legitimate, it sounds ridiculous. I'm in. Like any ridiculous movie, I'm in. Like I gotta see it at least once. That's how I do it. Oh, there he is. There's Marshall. Welcome, Marshall. I was wondering if you'd show back up. Good to have you. Good to have all you guys. I knew Blue Room would be here. I knew Uncle Pete would be here. I was hoping Heather would be here, so good job. And I was hoping Marshall would be here, so good job. We've got a good crew here. And to be honest, if like this is it for every live stream, that's fine with me. Like totally fine. Because you guys are cool. You guys have awesome stuff to say. And yeah, it'll just be like a movie club, basically. I'm down for that. That's amazing that that's actually a title of a film that's coming out. That's I'm gonna have to remember that one. Put that down on the old list to check out when it comes out. We'll wait until about like 7:05ish or so before we start talking about Cabin in the Woods, just because I want to make sure that everyone who really wants to talk about it has time to jump on. Yeah, definitely. Well, and that's the other thing. I mean, we could potentially even start talking a little bit right now. If there are any preliminary thoughts on what you guys want for the next one. Because I know, actually, I have a list. I know we were talking about it before, and I actually had the wherewithal to put a list together. So the other ones we have on the list are Some Kind of Hate, One Cut of the Dead, Tammy and the T-Rex, The Thing, Old Boy, and The Suckling. Obviously, we don't have to just pick from that. We can do whatever we want. Cabin in the Woods has to be one of the most examined films in history. To be honest, it begs to be really looked into, in my opinion. I mean, I felt that way the first time I saw it. Although, I think more examined are going to be like Midsummer and Hereditary and movies like that. Those are going to become more examined than Cabin in the Woods, in my opinion. Set in a remote Canadian town whose only industry is the local maple syrup producing plant, a group of lesbian warrior nuns posing as strippers. That is a gold premise for a movie. That is gold if I've ever heard it. It reminds me of like, did you see the trailer? I don't know if they're going to actually make the movie, but the trailer for Sky Shark, it's on YouTube. Look for it. Looks unbelievable. Literally, Nazi zombies riding sharks in the sky, and they take over an airplane. It looks crazy. Looks great. Stand guard vigilant, the last defense against the hordes of Satan. go into production later this year ahead of a planned 2021 release. Cool. And keep my eyes peeled. For sure. For sure. Okay, I'm giving it one more minute. And then we're getting right into this Cabin in the Woods talk. Because I have questions, like when we were talking about the platform. I have questions. Thankfully. Oh, and by the way, this is a recommendation I want to make to everyone. We could do this, actually, if you guys want to, as one of the live stream discussions. The show Cursed Films on Shudder, if you have not checked that show out, you should check that show out. It's awesome. And it's not just a check it out if you believe in, like, things actually being cursed and stuff. It looks at things from a few different viewpoints. There's 5 episodes. It's Poltergeist, The Omen, The Exorcist, The Crow, and the Twilight Zone movie. Very well put together, very well edited, really good interviews. Awesome. So if you haven't been watching that, watch it for sure. And like I said, if you want, we could actually make that a discussion topic for a live stream, because that could be pretty fun. The best comment about the platform I've heard yet. Oh, I'm ready for a zinger here. I have some great theories about Cabin. Can't take credit for them, but they are solid. That's fine. I mean, honestly, if you like look things up on the internet and bring that to these discussions, that's fine. I don't care. As long as we're talking about it. I have Cursed Films on my watch list on Shudder. Yeah, Uncle Pete. Take that to the top of your watch list. Definitely. It's wildly entertaining. It's so well put together. The other thing is, if you like The Crow, if you have ever liked the film The Crow, that episode will give you the feels. Like, I felt emotional after watching that episode. First 45 minutes or so are great, and then it starts to lose you, and it gets kind of lost in its own metaphor, and then it ends, and you're like, oh. For some people, I could see that about the platform, for sure. Okay, let's start talking about Cabin in the Woods, because we gave it enough time to wait for people. Okay, so my first question will just be, what are your thoughts on the film? Like, did you enjoy the film? Did you not enjoy the film? And don't just say, yes, I liked it, or no, I didn't like it. Like, give me a little behind that. Say, I liked it because of this, or I didn't like it because of this. Not interested in just the knee-jerk, no, hated it, or yeah, loved it. Just want a little extra, so I can see kind of into your minds a little bit how you feel about this film. And kind of when you were watching it, how you were watching it. Nice, looking forward to it. I love The Crow. Oh, well then, Uncle Pete, that episode about The Crow. Yeah, man. And feel me on this. I believe that if Brandon Lee had lived, that he would have been a wonderful choice to play Neo in the Matrix trilogy. I mean, I know people love Keanu Reeves, but Brandon Lee would have been great. He would have been such an amazing choice for that. So, Cabin in the Woods. Thoughts? Uncle Pete, I was surprised that I liked it so much. I didn't have any spoilers when I saw it, but it's a solid movie. Oh, really? Okay, that's good that you didn't have spoilers, because it is one of those films, like a lot of kind of surprise to the films, where it's much better going in without knowing much about it. What I want to know is, who has a purge button? LOL. Well, that's a good question. Blumhouse has a purge button. Haha. Terrible joke. Thought it was more popular than it is. I never considered it an underrated movie. Well, here's the thing. Like, when I get people to talk about it, most people I know really like it. There are some people I run into who didn't really like it, but people don't just talk about it. You know, like, there are a lot of horror films that people just like, without it's solicitation, like without you asking, they'll just start talking about that movie. Cabin in the Woods just isn't one of those, but if you get on the topic of it, a lot of people will be like, oh yeah, Cabin in the Woods is so great. But I remember when it came out in theaters, a lot of people were talking horribly about it, like just saying it was terrible. And I think a lot of that had to do with expectation, because the trailer made it look like it was like a straight up horror film, and so people were expecting that and not getting that in the theater, so it made them mad. Cabin in the Woods was like a deconstruction of the horror genre and was like a comedic horror movie. Yeah, no, definitely, Marshall. That's how I kind of felt. I felt like Cabin in the Woods was a way to take the formula that's been used so many times for horror films, use it in the film, and use it to make the point that this is kind of dumb that we keep following this formula, so why don't we do something else? And that's kind of the whole destruction at the end of, let's blow it all up and let's see what happens afterwards. You know, what's the new world going to be like, basically. One of the best horror endings in the last decade, if not the best. Okay. Got it, Uncle Pete. I mean, for me personally, I actually kind of, one thing I didn't like at the end was the, like, giant hand coming out and slapping down. Like, I thought they could have done the end of the world in a more interesting, different way, personally. But, yeah, the whole premise that you realize by the end of the film, yeah, great ending to it, in my opinion. Oh, and by the way, you guys, I did a movie review video for Cabin in the Woods, and I'm putting it up tomorrow. So I wanted to have the live stream first so you guys could talk to me about whatever you wanted to pertaining to it. And then if you want to, you can watch my review tomorrow so that you can see what I already said about it without talking to you guys about it. So, you're right on point, Marshall. Yes, I agree. I agree with you, Uncle Pete. Marshall's on point about that one. I'm talking about the part when all the elevators are... the elevator part. I mean, come on. That's, like, the most fun in this entire film. And it's glee-inducing, in my opinion. For someone like me who loves creatures and creature features, I remember the first time watching that, and as things are just, like, coming out, I just remember being like, oh my gosh, there's that's kind of like this, and there's that's like this, and then there was a second wave, which I got even more giddy about, because I was like, oh my gosh, I thought they released them all already. Here's more. And there's a unicorn, and there's a werewolf, and there's a ghost thing, and there's my buddy Rich's favorite one, the little, like, robot scorpion thing with the buzzsaw on the end. He loves that thing. And if you notice, it kind of, like, comedically makes its way through the scenes. That's funny. The giant hand was supposed to represent the audience reaction to a horror movie that doesn't follow the approved formula. Right. Like, they're squashing it. They're saying, like... Yeah, it's basically like a bad review in a sense. Just saying, I'm done with this. Yeah. I get your Blue Room. I dig it. The theory I heard on the Ancient Ones is that they are us, the audience. We want nudity, sex, blood, gore, and all the cliche characters that we want. Right, yeah. That's the whole thing about the expectation. And I think another twist on it is people could also kind of view the Ancient Ones as the studio, because the studio drives that too. It's one of those things where, like, the studio looks into what does the audience typically want, what films have been successful in the theaters, and then they base off that. These are the films we're looking for, and they go out and they look for those scripts, and they'll pass over scripts that don't fit that kind of formula that's been proven to bring in whatever amount of money they're looking for. So it's kind of the audience and the studios working hand in hand with that expectation and saying, this is the formula we want, this is the formula we have to get. And to the point about the sex and nudity, I think really where that's driven home is the part where Chris Hemsworth, his character Kurt and Jules are going to get it on in the woods, and she's about to pop her top, and then they show in the control room all those guys standing there just, like, ogling the screen waiting for it, and when it doesn't happen, just the giant sigh of, oh. I feel like there's a large component of the horror community audience that's what, like, they're like that when they're watching horror films. They're like, oh man, here come the boobs, and if they don't get it, they're like, oh man. It's and it's kind of baked into the culture because it's happened so long. I like how the movie explained the stupid decisions movie characters make. Yes. How self-aware the movie was is one of the best parts of it, in my opinion. And I took down a note when I was watching it last week that it hit me as it was the most self-aware film I had seen since Scream, because it looks at its own genre, looks at its own formula, and picks it apart and says, like, makes fun of it because it obviously has comedy to it, and points out how dumb things are. And it's genius. That's what I love about it. I liked all the homages it paid to horror, Evil Dead, and there were a lot of homages to Evil Dead, by the way. Deadites, the actual cabin itself, the trap door. Yeah, because Deadites was on that dry erase board of potential things. Oh, and the book, the Latin in the book, that's another one, Evil Dead. The cabin, angry molesting tree, Hellraiser, Hell Lord, clowns, zombies, twins from The Shining. Yeah, yeah, Marshall. Blue Room, unlike a film like Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the cabin loses its entertainment value more and more the film is watched. I could see how people would view it that way. I still love it, and part of the reason I think is because the first time I saw it, it blew my mind with the kind of points that it made, where it was kind of like, here's the horror formula, we're going to use it to destroy it, basically, and show you how ridiculous it is. So to me, I have such like an emotional attachment to it that every time I watch it, I still love it. I'm not going to love it the same as the first time I saw it because I know what's coming, but I still find a lot of enjoyment in it. But I could see it where it, for some people, it's that type of movie where once you get the point of it, every other time you watch it, it's just not that interesting anymore because you already know what's happening. There are definitely movies like that. Sucks that Jules' kill was off screen. I wanted to see the money shot and Carnage candy. Yeah, Marshall. Well, for a film like Cabin in the Woods, I feel like they definitely should have been delivering on those types of things. I don't understand why they didn't deliver as much. That's one of the things that kind of bothered me is, I mean, you got plenty of good ones. And actually, I'm going to turn the volume down just a little bit because it's starting to peak. Let me know if it goes too low. So where I was going with that is there are some great kill scenes in there. There are some ones where you see it straight up, like, crap, what is his name? The jock guy who was supposed to be getting with Dana when he was driving in the Winnebago, and he gets like a bar or like a spear or something through the neck. Like, that's a great one. I always laugh when Kurt hits the energy fence and goes tumbling down. Is that bad, by the way? It always makes me laugh. It's funny. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. Like, Jules should have been on screen. Because the other thing is, apparently in an interview, Joss Whedon, who was one of the writers of the script, had made a comment about how the movie was partially to point out, like, the ridiculousness of the torture porn film. So, if you're going to do that, like, go all the way with all of it. Because they do it at times, and then they don't, like in the instance of Jules. Marshall, there were tons of those, and it was awesome. Yeah. After Kristen Connolly put her pants on, Fran Kranz was the actor that made this movie. Yeah. Fran Kranz, obviously, he's the hero. Well, that's one of my questions I have down. And here we go. Is he a hero? Is Fran Kranz, his character Marty, is he a hero in this film? I would argue he's a hero to his friends, but is he a hero to society? I mean, he destroyed the world, basically. The characters were actually really well developed. They were not the tropes, a small touch, but the wall they developed, Holden, how he was struggling with temptation with the two-way mirror. Oh, yeah. Okay, that was his name, Holden. Yeah, and that was interesting because it was kind of the reverse of what you usually think about in horror films, where it would definitely be the guy who finds it and is just like, oh yeah, I'm watching this, and they flip it and he's like, oh, I don't feel good about that, and then they change rooms and then she's watching him take his shirt off, so it's the reverse. So yeah, I really liked that moment. That was good. Marty reminded me of Shaggy from Scooby-Doo. Yeah, and I think that Shaggy was a stoner, to be honest. I really do. I mean, obviously, they would never really say that, but a lot of people believe it was kind of like a veiled thing in the show that Shaggy was a stoner. Holden ain't slick when he asks to switch rooms with Dana because he immediately starts taking off his clothes to show off his six-pack in front of the mirror. Well, and yeah, and this is the thing. When I was watching that, I noticed that, and I was just like, why is he immediately, like, he knows the mirror is there, and he also knows it's not covered up because he immediately went over to that room and just starts taking his shirt off. So yeah, Marshall, exactly the point I was thinking when I was watching it. I was like, he knows, like, so I guess he was intentionally showing off for her. And then it's like, how far do I go before she covers up that mirror? Or two-way mirror. Heard that Marty was actually in the best shape of the three guys. That's why they had him wear baggy clothes. Really? Like, actually? Because that's interesting. If that's actually true, that'd be interesting. I want that coffee cup Marty had. They say the cup cost over $5,000. Oh my gosh! I mean, I believe that. I would believe that if you needed to have that like custom made, which they had to have that custom made. That's not something that exists. I was actually surprised that it was like functional. Like they could actually do that. Like they had it as a bong. I figured it would probably more be a thing where like, oh, it's like this, and then they like off screen you'd hear the noises of him kind of like, condensing it and fixing it to make it like a coffee cup, and then they would show it as a coffee cup. But no, they like showed it. So I was like, I mean, maybe that's an unnecessary cost for that reason for the movie, but I don't know. Movie was a Scooby-Doo episode gone wrong. Yeah, you could say that. It was a little bit like that. Yeah, Marshall. I can agree. But here's the question. Is Marty a hero? Like, do you guys actually believe that Marty was a hero in this? I've got other questions too, but I want to hear about that one first, and then we'll move on a little bit. And if you don't have anything to say about it, just say that you don't have an opinion on it. That's fine. Uncle Peter's right about Marty being the most ripped one. Since he's the stoner slacker cliche, and it would be weird seeing him as big as the athlete jock, Kurt. Yeah. Well, yeah, and I mean, if that is the case, that he was in like amazing shape, like yeah, for the role, you definitely have to make sure that he doesn't look like he's killing it, because with his character, all he's doing is I mean, you get the idea that all he's doing is hanging out and smoking weed and eating and sleeping, basically, maybe playing video games or something. In the scene where everyone goes in the lake, Marty is the only one who doesn't go in. Yeah, that's a good point, Marshall. Because that could be an indicator, like a little bit foreshadowing of how he's the odd one out in that whole situation, where like everyone's kind of bought into what's going on and they're just kind of going with it, and he's the one outlier who's not letting it take him over. He's thinking for himself. He's just hanging out. He's outside the group. And that also could be a foreshadowing of indicating all these people, well, because Dana was in there. I was going to say all these people die and he lives, but Dana lives, so scratch that. Not all heroes win the war. Yeah. Yeah, I could see that, Blue Room. So it's like he won the war of fighting against the oppression of that whatever it is, if it's a corporation or it's government run or whatever. And that's another question I have is, do you think that's a private company, or do you think that's a government entity putting on those scenarios and getting the sacrifices? I was watching the movie on Amazon, and it was trivia. It has trivia and note on the side with extras, and it mentioned that Marty was ripped. Jeez. Cool, okay. There you go. Well, then it's confirmed. Thank you for that, Uncle Pete. Blue Room. Tim DeZarn, who played Mordecai, the Harbinger, was in the Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning. Now, I'm going to admit, I haven't seen the beginning. Oh no, actually I think I have, but I haven't seen the whole thing. I've seen parts of it. So I don't think I've seen him in it. But that's a cool bit of trivia. Thank you. I think Marty was a hero. He figured things out. We saw the same thing about Marty Marshall. Okay, yeah. Okay. So Uncle Pete thinks that he was a hero in a sense. Well, and this is the thing, is I've watched this movie a lot of times, and usually I was just watching it for enjoyment. But since I was watching it for analysis purposes this last time, that's the only time it occurred to me, is he actually a hero? Like, I know it's supposed to feel to the audience that he is naturally a hero, and they do a good job of making it feel that way. But when you step back from the situation and you're kind of looking at it from a more analytical standpoint, it does kind of beg the question, is he really a hero? Because in certain ways I feel like he is, and in certain ways I feel like he's not. When Marty says we are not who we are, it's not to Shakespeare's Othello. I am not what I am. Right. Right. Yeah, Marshall. That's true. Nod to Shakespeare. Yeah. That's cool. I have read a bunch of Shakespeare, but it's been like a long time ago. A long time ago. I'm talking like 20 years. So thank you for refreshing me on that. He could be considered a reluctant hero. Yeah, because he's thrown into it and it's literally live or die, you know, and obviously you're going to try to live personally. So you might even be able to argue that he wasn't a hero because he was just surviving and that's it. And anyone would have done that pretty much. But he did go back to get Dana. Like he intentionally went to try and save her. So he was at least a personal hero for Dana. The movie is very meta, but there are underlying themes. Yeah, yeah, Uncle Pete. There are a lot of underlying themes, definitely. Okay, so now that we talked about that, let's talk about it. Do you guys think that that is a private company? Because it kind of, like, to me, I get the vibe that it's a private company, although it could kind of receive like government money or something. I don't know. So is that kind of more of like the role of the studio, of the movie studio, in the whole metaphor of the film, that like they are the studio making sure that everything goes the way it's supposed to on set, and follow the formula and everything, because the Ancient Ones, the audience, are gonna get mad otherwise. But within the context of the movie, not the metaphor portion of it, the actual like events and storyline of it, are they a private company? It kind of seems like they are, in my opinion. Especially because the one guy was like former military, the dude who was their like new bodyguard or whatever, who they used to kind of explain how things work to the audience, which I think was smart. I picked up the theme of choices, and we are all in control of our own destiny, not to be controlled by others. Yeah, Uncle Pete. I definitely see that one. It's kind of like a choose your own destiny, which is like the point they're trying to make about the horror genre in general, of we should take back control of the horror genre and refuse to just use the same formula over and over again. Like, do our own thing, like make it fresh, move forward. The Ancient Ones were the ones running the whole operation. I have to wonder, why didn't the humans just have a normal sacrifice to save the planet instead of making this a whole production? Blue Room. So to that Blue Room, I would say this. They make a comment. One of the guys in the like control room thing makes a comment at one point about, there used to be a time where you could just throw a woman into a volcano. And it's kind of speaking about that kind of speaks to how it used to be simple, and in order to satisfy the Ancient Ones, you literally could just sacrifice one person and just throw them in a volcano. And now it's gotten, like, it's evolved so much that no longer are the Ancient Ones satiated by just having that one sacrifice happen. It's like evolved over time. It's like, well, now I want this. Well, now I want this. Now I want this. And it's just gotten so ridiculous, which I think is kind of a point to how horror audiences way back, you know, when you started horror films, it was much easier to satisfy the horror audience. And as time goes on, people are like, well, I've seen that. And they just need like the ante upped and upped and upped and upped. And it's kind of like that thing is they're saying like, now it needs to be this way. It used to be much simpler, and it used to be this way that people were scared or satisfied with the film. But now, you know, it's got to be so much more. Blue. That's why I think we are the Ancient Ones. Yeah, Uncle Pete. I think it was a government agency. I mean, I felt like it could have been, but to me it felt more like private. Since they were working for the Ancient Ones who could wipe out the planet, plus there were other operations across the world. Okay, yeah, Uncle Pete. I could see that. It's more like you would need like a government entity to kind of coordinate that type of thing. It's a legitimate point. Marshall, government from the start. When they leave to the cabin, the guy is on their roof reporting they have left. Also, the gas station guy feels like he was placed as well. Yeah, so to that, Marshall, I get what you're saying. Like the guy on the roof, it looked like he was supposed to kind of invoke the image of like FBI, CIA, or something like that, because he was like in a suit and he had like the earpiece and everything, which is what people think of as like Secret Service, FBI, CIA, that type of stuff. So I could see that. I agree the Harbinger was placed there on purpose. Oh, definitely. Definitely the Harbinger was placed there on purpose. Well, and that's the whole thing. Like with a lot of those films, especially slasher films, like the harbinger is a mainstay. Like you always have to have that wacky, creepy dude who meets the kids and is like, "Don't go to that cabin. Terrible things happen there. You'll probably not come back." Like it's always there. So that's why he's there, because he's part of that formula. But what's interesting, I would say, is that one of the funniest parts, in my opinion, when he's on the phone to the control room guys and they're like not paying attention and making fun of him, basically. I feel like that's kind of foreshadowing that something's going to go horribly wrong for the people in the control room, because they're not taking the Harbinger seriously. And within the context of the film, the Harbinger is there to warn the kids, and then they have to make the choice to not listen to him. And they talk about that in the film. And so they're kind of like making their own bed to lie in. So they kind of reverse that, and by not listening to the Harbinger, who is telling you what is going on and making fun of him, they're not taking their job seriously, and therefore something bad's going to happen to them. They have chosen not to listen to him. So, I agree the Harbinger was placed there on purpose. Yep. The film felt like a mix between The Cube and 13 Ghosts. Interesting. Okay, I see the Cube portion, like with the elevators and stuff like that, and I like Cube a lot. Cube is awesome. That's maybe one we should do for this. 13 Ghosts, yeah, I can see the 13 Ghosts things. Yeah. Which, by the way, I know the 2000s 13 Ghosts film with like Matthew Lillard and Tony Shalhoub. I know that is it's a remake, but I like that film quite a bit. I don't know if you guys feel the same way. But yeah, Cube and 13 Ghosts, awesome. I see what you're saying about ties. I can see that. Okay, so next question. Okay, so here's the question. What are theories? We talked about the double mirror a little bit in context of Holden and Dana, but why is it there? That's a question. Do you think there's a legitimate reason within the storyline why it was there? Because I wouldn't think that it's anything that serves a purpose for the people in the control room, really. You know? So why is it? I mean, was it just in the script because they wanted to have that scene and it doesn't actually make sense otherwise? But it just didn't make sense to me to actually like just be there. Just saying. And then I guess another question I can throw at you at the same time is, are the sacrifices specific to certain cultures? Because for an example, they had the whole J horror film that was going on in Japan. So would you assume that it has to do with, the idea is whatever the sacrifices are is what's the most popular type of horror film basically in that region? Because they don't really show you any other ones other than the Japanese one. Yeah, Marshall didn't understand the double mirror. Yeah, I mean, it makes sense within the context of the story, but like when you step back and you're just like, why is it there? It doesn't make sense to be there at all. It really doesn't. Oh, Phil's creepy videos. What up, Phil? Hope everyone's good in the chat. People have been saying they're pretty good, Phil. Hopefully you're doing all right. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Wow, that's a good question. Maybe to entice Holden to look so he could meet the trope. Yeah, and yeah. So that kind of speaks to what I was saying. Like, they just wanted in there story-wise to kind of like flesh out his character and also just flip the script basically on, men really objectifying women, and they want to make it where the woman is objectifying the man there. Pretty interesting. So yeah. Yeah, the Russia location seemed like a nod to The Thing since it was cold and snowy. Good point, Marshall. Yeah, no, it definitely did have that appearance from the thing for sure. It definitely looked really dark, bleak, isolated, snowy. I could see that. I wish we would have seen a little bit more though. And that actually makes me think about sequels. I mean, I know there hasn't been any talk about a sequel or anything like that, but I would love for people to do a sequel. I agree about the cultures because one guy says that hard it's hard to kill nine girls. How hard is it to kill nine girls? Yeah. Well, that's the thing because the the sacrifice is in that sense culture specific then. Like it's not that the ancient ones aren't one group of ancient ones for the entire planet. The ancient ones then have to be separate groupings for each culture, each country, because otherwise because it looks like it has to be done different ways, right? Because for the United States, it was the whore, the fool, the jock, blah blah blah, and for Japan, the little glimpse we got, it was killing a bunch of school children. It's different sacrifice. Build sexual tension among the group. Blue Room, yeah, probably the reason for the mirror, I would guess. I mean, that makes sense. Phil just watched Dark Light on Netflix. I dug it. I had no idea about Dark Light. I haven't even heard about that. Wait. Dark Light? Or just Dark? Because I'm going to look that up. Was the Japan location a nod to The Ring or The Grudge? I think it was kind of, yeah, like that J-horror type of thing, Marshall. I think it was supposed to be like, if people have seen The Grudge and or The Ring, it'll look familiar to them. So yeah, I think that's what they were going for sure. And Phil, I'm gonna look at this Dark Light thing while we're talking and see what up. Dark Light. Okay, I ain't even heard of it, so I'm gonna look it up on my app real quick. Dark Light. Implicated in her daughter's disappearance, a mother searches for answers when she returns to an old family home that may have an unwanted visitor. Okay, so you're recommending? Because if so, added it to my list. Try and check it out. Thank you for that. If you want to watch a quick breakdown about the movie, check out Good Bad Flicks channel. Search for Cabin in the Woods. There's a great breakdown of the movie. Actually, you know what? I might check that out tonight after the stream because that sounds cool. I haven't when I'm gonna do review a video or review a movie and do a video for it, I make sure that I don't get influenced by that stuff. But now that I've already done it, I'm doing this live stream now, and then I have the video review coming out tomorrow because I've already recorded it. I can feel free to binge all that stuff. Had really good practical effects, only use CGI when necessary. That's key, Phil. The CGI only where you need it. Yeah, because less is more with CGI. Script was written in 3 days, which I thought was crazy. Yes, Marshall, definitely. Yeah, that's something I talk about in the video review that's coming up tomorrow. 3 days. That's interesting. But the two guys who wrote it, Drew Goddard, who directed it, and Joss Whedon, I take it they had a really good collaborative relationship because they had been working together for a while on the shows Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. So they were very familiar with each other. So I'm assuming that's why they could get it done in 3 days, because they clicked really well. Makeup effects were done by the actor that plays Nancy in Nightmare on Elm Street. Yep, Heather Langenkamp. That's in my video review as well that's coming out tomorrow. Yeah, AFX, I think, is the effects company. Yeah. Yep, Heather Langenkamp, man. Yeah, and they said that, I was reading an article, they were saying that they, their company had 60 people making the practical effects for Cabin in the Woods. And that they were working crazy hours to get it done because it was basically the amount of work for over 100 people, but they only had 60 people to do it, which is nuts. Because there's a lot of practical effects in there, and the werewolf looked really good. That's something I was really happy with. I like a nice looking werewolf. Heather runs FX business with her husband. They've done great work. Yeah. Yep, Uncle Pete for sure. Okay, here's another question about Cabin in the Woods. Was the electrical glitch that keeps the tunnel from blowing up because of Marty? Because when I was watching this over the phone with a buddy, with Rich, who was in the last live stream, and he was saying that he caught a few things where it seems like there's conflicting information in the movie, where with the way it lines up, it seems like maybe Marty is the one who causes the electrical glitch, so tunnel doesn't blow. But then at the same time, there was a comment made that it was supposed to have blown hours ago, which doesn't line up with the timeline of Marty causing that. So, what do you guys think? Or is it one of those issues where it's kind of too conflicting and it's kind of like a bit of a plot hole, maybe? Heather's my favorite all-time horror actress. Okay, Blue Room. There you go. She did a great job in those. Although I saw her in recently that movie The Portal, which I did a review for on my channel. The company who put it out contacted me to do a review for it, and I did. And actually, not, for being an independent film, like, it wasn't bad. It was pretty solid. Heather Langenkamp was in it though, and not so great. Her performance wasn't so great, which I was really bummed about because I also quite like her. I watched an interview with Heather, and she was talking about the merman scene, how they had to cut the scene because there was 100 gallons of blood used. Jesus. Interesting. So they had to cut it down, I guess. Because I love that scene. It's such a great payoff. I mean, comedically, it's a great payoff. And, carnage-wise. I think it's a plot hole. Yeah. Yeah, I think so too, Marshall. It seems like they had an idea of what they wanted to do, and then they kind of forgot about a line of dialogue. So I think they kind of wanted to present it two different ways, and they didn't realize that they made the mistake of leaving portions of each way in there instead of choosing one clearly. The text said they never got the order for the explosion. Yes, okay, so that's the thing, is that there were three things that happened. Marty had messed around with the electrical stuff, and so you get the idea that maybe that's what did it. So there's that. Then there's the fact that the tech guys said they never got the order. Then there's the fact that the not the tech guys, the other guys who were in the main control room said it should have blown hours ago. So those three things don't line up. It's funny how the one guy betted and wanted to see the merman to be the monster, but he finally got to see him in action when it killed him. Yeah, and that's what I'm saying, Marshall, about it being such a great comedic payoff. Yeah, I love that scene for that reason. And especially, like, he was like, oh, come on. Something to that effect. I think it's a plot hole, but on purpose, since the movie is meta, and there are normally plot holes in horror movies. Okay. I could go along with that theory, Uncle Pete. That's an interesting idea. Heather was also in Hellraiser Judgment, Blue Room. Didn't see Hellraiser Judgment. I love the first two Hellraisers, and I've watched past that. I think I've gone 5, the first 5 maybe. So I did not get far enough to see her in it, I don't think. But, yeah, good point that she's in Hellraiser Judgment. Cool that you're being asked to do a review. I had some reach out to me when I did reviews on a blog. Oh, really, Heather? That's awesome. It's fun. And one of the big things for me with doing those reviews is when it's someone who reaches out to me and they're independent, I don't say no because they're independent. Like I want to help out independent filmmakers as much as possible, but at the same time, I'm also going to be really honest in my review, and that's where it gets to be kind of tough because I feel bad being mean about those films, but at the same time, I also want to give constructive criticism too, so it's a little bit of a fine line. Nice theory, Uncle Pete. I agree. That was an interesting theory. Okay, next, let's talk about, other than the film Scream, are there more self-aware horror films than this? Or more self-aware ones, not more than this, but other ones you can think of that are really self-aware, like The Cabin in the Woods, like Scream. And would you count horror comedy movies in this? Say something like A Scary Movie, or Tucker and Dale versus Evil, or What We Do in the Shadows. But your thoughts? Because this movie got me thinking about that, about the whole meta and being super self-aware. And that's the thing, like, I love when films are self-aware like this because it creates a comedic aspect to it, and it's more intellectual as well. I like when writers and filmmakers can kind of make fun of themselves in a way. And if I don't know any other meta horror films besides Scream, Zombieland, yeah, Zombieland, yeah, and well, and that, but then that goes to another question: is it does it almost always have to have a aspect of comedy to it? I would say that like Scream has the least aspect of comedy, although there is some funny stuff in it. But does it normally have to have comedy to it to be that self-aware? It kind of seems like it ends up being that way though. I agree. I always try to say what I liked and didn't like about a movie. Always worried me when I reviewed a movie and someone from it reached out. I hoped I didn't burn it too much. I hear you, Heather. Yeah, like you want to be positive, but at the same time, if it's not a positive experience, you don't want to lie. Yeah, I pride myself on being very honest with my reviews, so I do keep to that. Never cared too much for the Scream franchise, Blue Room. Okay, I could see not caring too much for the Scream franchise, but what did you think of the first Scream? Because I would argue that that's a very smart film because of how self-aware it is. And I can kind of agree with you. I've seen the first three Scream films, and I liked the first one, and past that I was kind of, I mean, entertaining enough, I guess. But I actually hate the Scream movies. I think they're way overrated. They are meta, but then they try and be serious, in which they fail. Yeah, I could see that. Uncle Pete. Blue Room and Uncle Pete not feeling it. That includes the first film. Okay. All right. Fair enough. Everyone's entitled to their opinion on that. I think, the first time I saw Scream, I was kind of like, and then after that, I watched it again and I was like, oh, I like this a lot more. I found that I have that happen with films a decent amount. The first was okay, but the others were just garbage. Well, and I mean, isn't that how it normally ends up being with franchise films? A lot of them just, the first one's a great idea or a good idea, and then after that, they're just trying to repeat the success, the financial success, and a lot of times it just does not work. Although there are instances where it works, like the second Phantasm, the second Hellraiser. I would argue the next three Saw films after the first one, I think, were solid. Maybe it's because I'm older than the usual Scream fan. That's possible, Blue Room. That's possible. I mean, some of the stuff is definitely generational. You have to respect the first Scream. It revived the genre from just bad sequels of slashers. It was a bland time for horror. I think Wes Craven was a genius for it. Wes Craven, I agree with you on that, Marshall, but I also want to point out that Wes Craven made the film. He directed the film. He didn't write it, though. I'm going to give you the name of the person who wrote it. I don't remember. It's some, kind of unknown dude, basically. So I would argue that that's the guy who deserves the majority of the credit, because that's another thing that I don't like about film in general, is a lot of time the writers do not get enough credit. It's all about the director, and the director didn't create the material a lot of the times. They just direct it. Okay, so the guy who wrote the Scream script, the first one, was Kevin Williamson. What else has he written? Let's see. 26 writing credits. He wrote the scripts for I Know You Did Last Summer. That makes sense. Scream 2, The Faculty, which The Faculty is pretty solid. Scream 3, Teaching Mrs. Tingle. He did some Dawson's Creek. Ooh, the film Cursed that Wes Craven did with Christina Ricci, the werewolf one. Scream 4. All right, now we're getting a little. And he's done a bunch of shows, so. But that's who it is, anyway. Just want to give that guy his credit. I'm a little up there myself. Blue, not a young guy. Uncle Pete says. I mean, I don't consider myself young either. I'm like 40. Gonna be 39 next month, but I'm rounding up at this point to prepare myself, you know. I grew up watching Hammer films, nice, and Universal films, so maybe that plays a part in my views of movies. Yeah, and you know, that's the thing, like, where do you start with horror? What do you love? I mean, I gravitate a lot to 80s horror because I was born in the 80s, and I wasn't allowed to see much film, like much horror stuff while I was, you know, alive in the 80s and even in the 90s because my parents were really strict. But because that's the era I'm from, like, I gravitate to those, which you can probably tell from the reviews I do. He wasn't really unknown at the time, the writer. Oh, really, Heather? I mean, now he's definitely unknown, but I didn't know at the time he wasn't unknown. Blue Room, plus Roger Corman is all-time favorite director. Damn, I am old. No, Blue Room, don't do that to yourself. I love Roger Corman. He has put out some really great stuff. And one movie I love of his, Death Race 2000. With David Carradine. God. And Sylvester Stallone. I love Death Race 2000. Trying to get a hold of that on Blu-ray. Didn't Wes pitch the idea, though? At least that's what my film professor said. You know, I don't know, Marshall. That's a good question. He may have. He definitely may have. I'd have to look into that, but good point if that's the case. I grew up on those as well. I would watch them with my dad since he saw them in theaters. He'd tell me how cheap movies were. Oh yeah, movies used to be crazy cheap. Yeah, Uncle Pete. Now, I haven't seen much of any Hammer or Universal, but at some point I need to get into that. I got into a really bad situation of early on, before I got really adventurous with my horror films, I would only focus on newer stuff because as a younger person, I just felt like if it's older, it's garbage just by default, and the newer stuff is better. That's what I want to watch. And I know a lot of people are still like that, but I started to kind of expand and be like, well, I hear about all these films that have influenced what's being done now. So let me, you know, go back and see where the influence is coming from. And excuse me, then I realized that a lot of those films were a lot better than what you would end up getting that I was all about for a while. So I learned my lesson. So, okay, let me move to another question, though. Steer us back to Cabin in the Woods. Not that this is a problem, because it's not. Do you think that ritual sacrifice is what we basically are looking for each time we watch a horror film? Because we expect to see deaths. We are expecting to see a level of sacrifice in the film. You know, watching Friday the 13th when Jason Voorhees shows up, you're like, someone's got to get it. And we will, at least I know I do, we will pick out, it's going to be this person, I want this person to get it. Ooh, I really hope this person gets it in the worst way. That type of stuff. So what do you think? Go wild on that. Went out and did some actual exercise, so gotta stay hydrated. Yes, we want people to die. Yeah, it's a pretty easy answer to that one. I mean, is that what we're mainly looking for, though, in the films? Like, I know some people, yes, but like for me personally, like, I appreciate good death scenes in horror films, and it's mainly because practical effects for me are an art. You know, like, can you make it look real? Can you make it look good? Can you make it look, you know, terrible? So for me, it's like an art form. But also, like, I'm looking for creativity. That's another big thing. And it's not just with, like, the practical effects and the death scenes, but just, like, the story in general. That's what had drawn me to the horror genre over time. Big time is how creative it is. It's like the most creative genre. Depends on the film. I'm in it for the kills in some movies, but more into a good plot than anything. Okay, Heather, I dig on that. Yeah, and there are certain films where going into it, your expectation is this is going to be all about the kills, or knowing what the premise is, that's what I want to get out of this film. So, yeah, that's a good point, Heather. In a way, we kind of cheer for the slasher. Mm-hmm. Like, yeah, I want to see Jason mess some people up. Yeah, Marshall. That totally ends up happening, especially when they put unsympathetic characters into these films, and Cabin in the Woods takes those unsympathetic characters and turns it around. And is like, here's the whore, here's the jock, here's the stoner. All the people who in these normal slasher films were thinking, oh, they're going to get it and we don't feel bad about that. Well, here's the flip side of that. Here's who they really are, and they're not that way. So now you care when they kind of get it. Although, I don't know if I really did in the film, but, you're supposed to, I think. And we want it to be brutal. That's why the movie series Hatchet is so cool. They go overboard and it's great. Movies like that are pandering to their audience. Good point, Uncle Pete. And to that point, this goes back to what we were talking about with the Cabin in the Woods, about the comment where they were saying you used to just be able to throw a woman into a volcano for the sacrifices. And now they have to do all this. They have to do all the slasher stuff. So you're a perfect example right there. Well, what you said about like Hatchet is that a long time ago, pick a really old horror movie. You didn't have to do a whole lot. Bela Lugosi is Dracula. That's all you had to do to really scare people and be like, oh my gosh, this is amazing horror. But then nowadays, you need something like Hatchet, where it's these over-the-top crazy kills. And that's just mirroring what's in Cabin in the Woods. Going from the, woman in a volcano to this very elaborate sacrifice of multiple people. Blue Room loved the Hatchet series. I have to go back to that. Because I'm going to admit right now, I watched the first 2 Hatchet movies and I didn't like them. But it's been a while, so I think I need to go back. Although for some reason I own 2 and 3, and I don't own the first one. I don't know how this happened. It just happened. Oh, I think I got them in a horror box a long time ago. The 2 and 3. Oh, that was Box of Dread, by the way, which that company. We want nudity, sex, blood, gore, originality, and even humor. Yes. I'm looking for all those things in horror movies, Uncle Pete. Definitely. Well, I mean, nudity doesn't matter to me. If it's there, I don't feel any way about that, to be honest. The sex as well. I'm mainly looking for originality, an engaging story, cool characters, like humor sometimes, don't like it other times, and definitely gore. Because like I said, it's like the practical effects gore, at least, it's an art form. If it's CG, I'm more like... Yes, we do normally cheer for the slasher. Freddy and Chucky are beloved characters. Yeah, Uncle Pete, they are. And that's kind of an interesting thing. And I don't know if I want to take it this way, but do you think that that's part of the reason that now true crime is such an interesting thing and you have people who are very interested in serial killers? Because, I get in these situations where, like, I listen to true crime podcasts and I watch some true crime shows, but I then have people who talk to me and will be like, who's your favorite serial killer? And, like, I always stop people when they say it that way because I don't identify with that. I identify with, maybe whose background or what they did is more interesting, but favorite seems... So I don't know if maybe that's why we're there, is because we've come to love Jason Voorhees and Michael Myers and Freddy Krueger. Give it a second chance, Hatchet. I will. I will, Uncle Pete. I will. Yes, Uncle Pete, especially since Robert Englund and Brad Dourif are the characters for the entire franchise, unlike Michael and Jason, where there's numerous actors that play the role. That's a good point, Marshall, about Freddy and Chucky. It's a good point. I'm not really big on the Child's Play movies. They're fine, but I don't know. Just not big on them. But Nightmare on Elm Street, dig it. I was lucky enough to have met Robert Englund. He's a cool dude. Always try to watch the first showing of a horror movie as a 12-year-old then save any judgment for the second viewing. Oh, as a 12-year-old. Huh. That's an interesting concept, Blue Room. Huh. Okay. So view it expecting nothing, kind of, and like you don't know a whole lot about horror films or film in general, and then on the second viewing, view it as an adult and more intellectually. That's interesting. That's a cool approach. I dig that. Favorite serial killers to taking it too much. I agree, Carlin. Yeah, Marshall. That's. And I literally had a conversation with someone where they brought that up, and I stopped them, and I was just like, I don't agree with that terminology because serial killers are terrible people, so we shouldn't say favorite. It became an awkward conversation, to say the least. But you know. Okay, let me move to another question about Cabin in the Woods. The quote, "It's time to give someone else a chance." Marty says that. So is this meaning tearing down the horror formula and letting someone else step in to create something new? Do you think that's where they're trying to take it, you guys? Is that the commentary? And then here's a follow-up question, actually. Tear it all down and start anew. Even though not following the formula is said to become Armageddon, is it really Armageddon at that point? What comes after the fallout? So basically, to pair it with the question of it's time to give someone else a chance, at the end of the film, it's apocalypse, basically. Like, they give you the idea it's the ending of the world, but is that actually the end of the world? And is it a situation where the characters in the movie are talking about it being the end of the world, but that's not necessarily the end because no one's been there before, and there may be something after that for the rest of humanity, that is. And then if that's the case, what does that look like? What comes after the fallout? Like I was saying. That's a good take on that comment. Yeah, Uncle Pete. Yes, it's time to give other people a chance at horror, like Jordan Peele, for example. Yeah, Marshall. I mean, that's what you end up with. Like, you have these new directors who step in and people attach to because they did something new. So, like Jordan Peele, like when he did Get Out, the story wasn't necessarily something new, but the perspective that he brought into the story was something new. So he took an older story, like Stepford Wives, basically. He updated it for now, and he put a totally different perspective, a totally different point of view to it, and commentary, like background commentary on it. So, yeah, yes, I agree with that. So I would say, like, who's like the hottest director, the newer hottest directors right now? Obviously Jordan Peele. Excuse me, I would say Ari Aster is becoming one of them, the guy who did Midsummer and Hereditary. Other than that, can't think of anyone else off the top of my head. It could be, but horror fans are a fickle bunch. Something or someone new doesn't get accepted as much as it should. Yeah, that's actually a really good point, Heather. Yes, I do feel like a movie has to be a certain age, in my opinion, and it needs to become like a cult following first and then work its way up. Like, it definitely seems that newer horror movies, when they hit the theater, the horror crowd's not into them as much. That they need a lot of time to pass and then rediscover them to be like, oh, now this movie's awesome. And that's why, like, one that has actually gained a lot more traction recently with the new reissue from Scream Factory is that 13 Ghosts movie. I remember seeing it in the theater when it first came out, and I really liked it. A lot of people were just like, oh, that's garbage. Didn't hear anything about it. All of a sudden now, there's a reissue on Blu-ray, and I'm hearing about it a lot. A lot of horror fans are like, oh, 13 Ghosts. I love 13 Ghosts. That movie's so good. It's so underrated. So I feel like it's this culture of rediscovery with these films. I mean, consider a lot of the films that Joe Bob Briggs covers on The Last Drive-In and used to on Monster Vision. He's taking a lot of older films typically and reintroducing people to them with different context to it, and he's kind of throwing his love for that film to you to say this is how I experience it, and people are starting to accept that. So I think that's kind of further creating this culture of the love of movie rediscovery, which on the flip side creates a hatred of the new stuff. So that's a good point. I don't know if I should have taken it that far, Heather, but good point. Heather, that is why we always get remakes. Yeah, Uncle Pete, and a lot of times remakes are just not good. They remade Cabin Fever after 5 years or so. That's a good point, Uncle Pete, and why? Why did we do that? The original Cabin Fever was good. Not good enough to warrant a remake, though, I would say. Also, Jason Blum, with his Blumhouse production company, giving new creativity to the genre. Yeah, I mean, that has been happening, and I mean, Get Out, Jordan Peele's Get Out is basically what launched Blumhouse into being a legitimate production company, I think. At least that's what it seemed like to me. Blumhouse had some great films, yeah. Jordan Peele, didn't care much. Us, I guess Blue Room saying he didn't care for for Us that much. I liked Us. I thought it was pretty interesting. To be honest, I liked Us more than Get Out. Just saying. I felt like there's a lot more interesting subtext to it. Plus, like, they made the tethered people like very creepy, and I dug it. Not a fan of his. That's fine. Stop remaking films. See my comment on Jacob's Ladder. That's true, Blue Room. There are some films that I think the remake works, but this is a discussion that happens amongst horror fans all the time. Usually it doesn't work. In those rare occasions you get good remakes, but, I feel like it's better to be inspired by other films and have some semblance of it in a newer version of it, but don't remake it, like have an homage to it. Nods to it, like Cabin in the Woods. Yeah, Uncle Pete, I think Blumhouse is the powerhouse for the modern horror movies. Yeah, at the moment, although, Marshall, I would argue that I think A24 is, because they put out Hereditary, they put out Midsummer, they put out Fabric, which I haven't seen yet. I heard, I'm going to watch this soon, within this week, The Killing of a Sacred Deer. That was A24 as well, and I hear that's quite good. I will be checking that out and doing a review for it. I agree, Blue. In my opinion, there are only a few good remakes. Thing, Fly, Blob. I agree with those three for sure. The Fly, The Thing, The Blob. And they're all the movies. Coincidence? Maybe not. The something. Maybe that's the criteria. It has to be the something in order for it to end up being a good remake. They're remaking Hellraiser. Well, are they remaking Hellraiser? They've been talking about remaking Hellraiser for 20 years or so, and it's been being worked on, and they keep losing the directors over and over again. Now, I know that Clive Barker was going to be involved and potentially directing it, but I met Clive Barker last year. He's not in the greatest of shape. I'm not so sure he's going to be directing that. Also, Texas Chainsaw, which has had like 3 remakes already. Yes, it has. Good point, Carlin. A24 is a powerhouse as well. Yeah. I haven't seen like a crazy amount of A24 films, but the ones I've seen, I've liked every single time. Like, and the ones I've seen of theirs, I've always been like, that's a really good movie. Not just, okay. This has been really good. That's the ticket for a good remake. Yeah, I know, Uncle Pete, right? We just stumbled onto this. It's got to have the. Alright, so another question out there. Is Marty, we already talked about that. I jumped that up. Okay, this is a fun question. If there was a sequel to The Cabin in the Woods, what setting would you want for it, and what creature would you want chosen? It doesn't necessarily have to be one that showed up in Cabin in the Woods, but it could. But what setting, what premise, what creature or villain or whatever would you want for the sequel? Because honestly, that world is ripe for the picking. Like, just pretend the whole end of the world didn't happen. Or they thought it happened, but it didn't really. And they get more people working there. And they keep doing the sacrifice thing. Let's go with that premise. You could do so many films, as long as they're good. Then it could turn into those terrible franchises. Hopefully not, but This is something I want him to explore. I want this. This is an excellent interview with Jason Blum on Ben Shapiro's show on YouTube. I'll have to check that out. I don't even know what Jason Blum looks like. I'll have to check it out just to figure that out. The only good thing about remakes is they sometimes get people to check out the original. That is a good that is a good thing that remakes can do, basically, yeah. Is it can make people aware that there was an original, because I can't tell you how many times people have seen The Thing, which is amazing, and then not know that it was a remake. And I feel like there are a lot of films like that. What was another one recently, and someone was like, "Oh, that's a remake? I didn't know that." I can't remember. It was one recently that I watched. The only Sorority House would be a great setting. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And to that end, it makes me think of great movies like Black Christmas and Slumber Party Massacre, which Slumber Party Massacre is Halloween. It's the same film. They just changed some things. But it's still fun. I love it. So yeah, Sorority House is a setting. Classic. Very 80s. I'm down. Setting small town like It and Stranger Things. Yeah, so like Derry, or what is the town in Stranger Things? Hawkins. Yes. Creature possessed doll. Oh my god. Yeah. So I have like a love-hate with possessed dolls. I think they can be really scary and creepy, but I also think there's a high likelihood that they're going to be corny and look stupid. You know what I mean? So like you have to execute them a certain way. It's not easy. Why the hell did they remake Black Christmas twice? I don't know. That's I don't know, Uncle Pete. I can't tell you why. I can't tell you why. Well, no, I think I can tell you why. Actually, I think what ends up happening is studios have a very incestuous relationship with writers, directors. They get people that they like to work with, and they like to stick with those people. They very much try not to read new scripts and get new ideas. They try and just stick with the people who they've been continually working with. Now, the problem is, like with a lot of people in their jobs, if you're just doing the job over and over and over again, and you're not bringing new people in, you're having the same stagnant, stale ideas. And you need new creativity. You need new blood to get new ideas. So the problem is they intentionally are not seeking out new ideas and new scripts, so they don't have anything to go with. So they're just like, well, what do we have? We got to put a movie out. Well, let's just remake something. Because they're like, oh, it worked before, it can work again. I think that's why. And neither remake is close to the original. They changed the whole story and still call it a remake. Yeah, that's a good point, Uncle Pete, about the Black Christmas remakes. I didn't see the most recent one. I did see the one early 2000s. Was that early 2000s that they did the first remake of Black Christmas? It was in there. It's like 2002 or something like that, I think. But yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, and they changed it. The original was great, though. Another great remake was The Invisible Man. I have not seen it, but I've heard only good things, actually, so I will be seeing it at some point. The next movie I'm watching is probably The Killing of a Sacred Deer, and then I'm also going to be watching the new movie Underwater, which looks like Alien underwater. But it's got Kristen Stewart, so it might suck, because I don't like Kristen Stewart, but I'm going to give her a shot. I'm all about second chances with actors, actresses, movies. Okay. No. So this question kind of goes with what we're now talking about, which is, do you guys agree with wanting to break the horror formula mold, or do you like the way it is at the moment? I mean, do you want to just keep mining the same horror formulas? Do you want to go back to a particular decade and say, why don't we make more movies like in the 70s, more movies in the 80s, 90s, whatever? I would argue we don't need any more horror films like in the 90s, because I don't feel like a whole lot of great stuff came out of that. era, but and obviously, this is my personal thing. I thought a lot of great stuff came out in the 80s because they were like greenlighting everything in horror at that point, and I think that's why we have so many that come back now from the 80s. Yes, Marshall, a very good movie. It's going to bring back the Universal Monster movies. That could be awesome for the Universal Monster idea to come back, because I know originally they were going to try and rebuild that whole world, but they failed with that Mummy movie because they didn't make it about the mummy. They made it about friggin' Tom Cruise. That was such a stupid idea. I didn't even see that movie, to be honest, because I heard only terrible things. But then again, there are going to be remakes. Yeah. Haha, you caught yourself there, Uncle Pete. You got excited and then you got not excited. I think remakes are the problem in Hollywood in general, with Disney just doing live actions like Lion King, Dumbo, Aladdin, etc. Yeah, Marshall, that's kind of dumb, in my opinion. It's like, literally, they're like, here's the exact same movie, just instead of being animated, it's going to be live. Like, I'm not at all interested in that garbage. That is so stupid. I want to check out Underwater as well, but just like you, Kristen Stewart equals yuck. I know. Although, she may be better now. I don't know. We'll see. I'll let you know. I mean, I'm going to do a review on it, so yeah, I'll let you know. Underwater felt like a Cthulhu movie to me. Ooh. I like the sound of that, Heather. I like some Cthulhu. Marshall, I want more original slashers like The Collector. Dude, I like The Collector. I really like The Collector, actually. And honestly, I thought The Collection was a pretty good follow-up. A lot of people, that's another one. A lot of people don't talk about The Collector, and it's underrated. It's underrated, and The Collection is underrated. I'm glad you brought that up, Marshall. I think it has to evolve, but I grew up watching 80s horror. I think we can reinvent those movies, classic slashers, but with an original idea. Yeah, I agree with that, Uncle Pete. And, Cabin in the Woods is basically supposed to be, like, one of the things Joss Whedon said with that film is he was trying to revitalize the slasher. That's one of the things he really wanted out of making Cabin in the Woods. So that kind of goes to what you're saying. But yeah, I agree with that. I would love to see some more cool slashers just done with different ideas. Uncle Pete, they have Jordan Peele working on a Universal Monster movie. Ooh. Marshall, do you know what one? Or there's not that level of information yet? Like Dracula or I don't know. The Collector was great. Even the sequel was good, and I think there will be a third. Well, when did The Collection come out? Because it's been a while. So are they going to do a third one? The Collector franchise is great. Uncle Pete Carl. Oh, yeah, Marshall. Yep, a lot of love for The Collector here. Next movie discussion: The Collector. I will add it to my list, Uncle Pete. Okay, we talked about it enough. I'm gonna add it to the list, and maybe that's just the one we want to go with next. We can do that. We'll talk about it in a minute. The Collector. It's on the list. Okay. I mean, the last question. Oh, wait, hold on. No movies about the bees, not the bees. Nice. The last question I had, we don't need to go down this road, but do you think studios get too involved in horror films? Can you think of any films you wish were left more in the creator's control? Because I personally do feel like there are a lot of instances where I trust the writer, I trust the director, I trust the talent involved, but I hear these stories of the studio getting way too involved and just totally screwing it up. Like a great story that I read more recently was what happened to Event Horizon, the film Event Horizon. They cut so much out of that film, and the director had a much different vision for it. The script was much more robust, much more interesting. But the studio stepped in and they're like, oh, well, we think we know better than the people who make these films. We just finance it, but, since we finance it, we're going to control all this other stuff. We don't leave it to the artists. It's literally like just having like an accountant show up and tell you how to do your job or change your job after the fact. But anyway, but yeah, people's thoughts on that. Black Lagoon is what people are saying, Carlin, about Jordan Peele doing a Universal Monster, but it's speculation. He's definitely doing one, though. Ooh. A remake of Creature of the Black Lagoon. I did like Humanoids from the Deep, so if it's something like that, that could be fun. They haven't said what franchise he will direct, just some of his casting hopes. Can't remember who, though. Okay. Problem is that the director has to follow the orders from the people giving the money. I know. Well, and that's the thing, is it's like, it comes down to trust, though. Like, that's what ends up happening, Blue Room, is it comes down to trust. Like, it just seems to me that these studios, like, they'll go to a director who is proven and they know can give them what they want. And they say, hey, here, do this, do your thing. And then once the process gets going, they start sticking their hands into it too much, and then they want too much control. It's like, can't you just trust that the person you hired is going to do the job that you thought they were going to do when you hired them? And one of the biggest examples of this kind of crap happening, I don't know if you guys remember, like, the French Extreme films, when they happened, like, Inside, Martyrs, High Tension, Frontiers, movies like that. And then a lot of those directors came over to Hollywood, and a lot of them got chewed up and spit out. I think Alexander Aja is the most prolific from that group, because he's still putting out a good amount. But I've read some interviews with a bunch of them where they were like, Hollywood is not at all what we thought. We were promised all this stuff, and then we showed up, and it was like a bait and switch. Like, prime example, Xavier Yens, the guy who directed Frontiers, he came over and he directed the Hitman movie with Timothy Olyphant. He shot it as an R-rated film. Then when he gave it to the theater, he brought it to the theater, they said, oh, we wanted a PG-13. He's like, I shot it as an R, though. I can't make this a PG-13. And they said, well, if you won't edit it down to a PG-13, we will. So they brought in another person, someone from outside, and had them edit it down to a PG-13. Xavier Yens stepped back and he said, I want my name off this thing. I totally disown it. It's not my film anymore. So that's a prime example, in my opinion, of the studios just being terrible. You need more creator control. That is why I love Rob Zombie movies. You get the movie he wants to give you. Yeah, Uncle Pete. Now, I would personally say that I don't like a whole lot of Rob Zombie movies, but yeah, I do respect that kind of level of independence that he has. He's definitely out there doing what he wants to do, and I really respect that, and I really respect his creativity with that stuff. It's just, I don't want to consume all those films just because I don't like them all, This is just not my thing, but I respect what he's doing for sure. And the fact that he was an amazing musician, and then he stepped over into doing film. Yeah, studios get in the way. That's why there's theatrical cuts and director's cuts. Not always, though, Marshall. When we're lucky, there are those cuts. Prime example, we'll never get that director's cut of Event Horizon because all that extra footage they cut was either lost or destroyed. Someone finally, one of the old producers actually finally found like an original cut on VHS, but the interest just isn't there for people to cut it. I love gritty looking movies like Texas Chainsaw Massacre and Rob Zombie films. Well, and he takes a lot of inspiration, Blue Room, from Texas Chainsaw Massacre. He loves the whole Tobe Hooper aesthetic, for sure. Good point on the PG-13 R movie. R. Carlin, more studios want PG-13 for bigger audience. It, 2017, gave hope because it was rated R and it made $1 billion. Yeah, I agree with that, Marshall. Well, and go to like the superhero stuff. Like for the longest time, they're like, we need to keep superhero films like PG-13. Well, then they did the R-rated Deadpool, and then they were like, oh, you can make money this way. So then they did a green light for the R-rated Logan film, Wolverine, which I actually didn't like that film, but maybe I need to rewatch it. I don't know, but I just feel like studios get into this situation where they're just used to thinking a certain way. They have this certain mental model. It's what it's called, like being stuck in certain mental models. And they need to break that cycle. They need to be more creative. They need to be more open to thinking outside the box and accepting newer ideas. That's what I was talking about with like bringing in new blood. If you just have the same old people with all the money calling the shots, like they're just going to go with what worked in the past. They're not going to go with what they think can work right now, and like literally like checking in and feeling the pulse of the current audience. Like, where is the market now? You have to adapt to this stuff. Otherwise, you're gonna, put out crap. And like even then, you're still gonna have some bombs, but you can make more good stuff. True with the comic book genre, Joker also made $1 billion and it was rated R. I didn't see Joker, by the way. I want to because I've heard good things. Plus, I like Todd Phillips, so respect for him. And I also liked that it was kind of like seemed like an older style film and very like character driven. And it was not Jared Leto's Joker, who I thought was awful. Which, by the way, tying that in, that stuff is very horror related. Like, superhero stuff is very rooted in horror, especially like Batman. Like, look at a lot of the villains with Batman. They're all rooted in horror stuff, pretty much. Which leads me to something I've thought about for a long time. I want a superhero type film, kind of like Avengers, but with villains. Like horror film. I had hopes for that movie. Crap, what was it? Where they took like all these horror icons and they were saying it was kind of going to be like the who's who of horror icons, but it ended up being terrible from what I heard. Who thought the final Predator movie was good? I didn't see it because I heard nothing good about it. So, but I will say right now, unpopular opinion, the first Alien vs. Predator was a fun movie. I enjoyed it. New Joker movie isn't so much about the Joker. I've heard that, but if it's a good film, I'm down. Because the other thing is, like, I've gotten so much Joker, so that doesn't matter to me as much. And I was most satisfied, like a lot of people, with Heath Ledger's Joker in Dark Knight. That was fun. Thought Predator was good for what it is, or what it was. So should I watch it, Uncle Pete? The newest Predator? Is it called Predator or is it Predators? No, The Predators was the one with Lawrence Fishburne. That one was alright. Yeah, anyway, the newest Predator. I think it's still on HBO Go at the moment, so I can watch it. So should I? Weigh in. Let me know. Joker was an excellent film. Even went to the theater to see it. Okay, cool. Yeah. I've been planning on seeing it, so this just makes me want to even more. New Mutant seems to have mixed superheroes with horror. Has it? Who did that? Who did New Mutants? Where can I access that? And is it good? I remember seeing a trailer for it, and it did seem horror-esque, but I didn't want to, believe that that's necessarily what it was going to be, because, sometimes those things are very misleading. Predator. Give it a watch. I liked it as much as Predators. Okay, well then maybe I could like it enough. I'll do a review. I'll watch it and do a review on it. I can do that. I'm down for it. The Doctor Strange sequel is going to be to experiment with horror. Yeah, I did hear that. I got excited. Especially because Sam Raimi's going to do it, who has done horror and superhero before. I didn't read. They got Sam Raimi to direct it, which is a good mix since he did Evil Dead and Spider-Man. Yep, 100%. 100%. I'm down with that. And I would argue that Sam Raimi has always been better at doing horror than superhero. New Mutants has been in development hell. It hasn't released yet. Oh, really? Ugh. Well, they had a trailer for it. How can they still... I don't know. Sounds like a studio mismanagement thing. It was supposed to be out at the start of this month. I don't know when it will be out now. Ugh. Yeah. Well, that's a lot of things at this point. I kind of have a feeling we're going to be switching more to digital. And they'll just do... Now available... Pay $10 at home to watch it for the next month. New Mutants has not come out yet. It was supposed to come out 2 years ago. Keeps getting pushed back again and again. It's like that Hellraiser remake. Just keeps getting pushed. I'll see it when I'll believe it when I see it, is what I meant to say. Final Predator movie is called The Predator 2018. Got it. Oh, but there's the in it, so it should be a good remake, right, Blue Room? That's what we identified. There's that the. Better be good. All right. So, since there's a little bit of a lull in the combo here, let us talk about what we want to do for the next film. So, we have talked about. Wait, hold on. It got caught up with the Fox Disney deal. That's why New Mutants hasn't released. Okay, that makes sense, Marshall. I thought the Predator was the first one, and this was Predator. Oh, yeah, I don't know. All right, so I know we just talked about The Collector. Now, is that available for streaming anywhere? I mean, that doesn't matter to me because I actually own it on DVD, so I could watch it that way. But I just want to make sure that if I'm going to put it out there, it's available to streaming on something. So we could do The Collector if that's the case. Otherwise, we could easily go with something on Shudder because obviously I'm very much about Shudder on my channel. So as a reminder, I have on here Some Kind of Hate, One Cut of the Dead, Tammy and the T-Rex, The Thing, Old Boy, and The Suckling. Which, by the way, Tammy and the T-Rex is on Showtime. For some reason, I'm getting Showtime for free until the 30th, and I was just on there looking for what movies are there, and I saw Tammy and the T-Rex on there. So I was like, huh. I'd like to go with a lesser-known movie. I would like to recommend Some Kind of Hate. So I will say, when I was jumping on for Joe Bob last night, whenever I jump on the Shudder app, I always like to look at what they're showing on each of their channels, and Some Kind of Hate was on there, and I saw a little portion of it that was very intriguing to me, so I would be down for Some Kind of Hate. Heather, Prime and Shudder. Prime and Shudder is what you have, Heather? I'm assuming. I don't have Amazon Prime, but I can find ways to get other stuff. Like, since I have Netflix DVD service, I can get a lot through that. That's how I'm going to watch Underwater. And I don't care that it's on DVD and not Blu-ray. It's fine. So we have one vote for Some Kind of Hate. I would be fine. Who was it that did that? Was it the same filmmaker who did Daniel Isn't Real? Did Some Kind of Hate? Is that what I'm thinking? The Collector's on Prime. It's not on Shudder. I'm pretty sure it's not. Is it? Oh wait, maybe it is. Let me look. I can look. Oh, yep, it is. Thank you, Heather. Sorry about that. Sorry I doubted you. Yes, The Collector is on Shudder. Not bad. Just one last comment on The Cabin in the Woods. The purge button was kind of questionable. Why would you want the ability to let out all the monsters in the first place? You know, I'm very ashamed to admit, Marshall, that I didn't think about that. I just got wrapped up so much in the fun of it that it happened, but that's a really excellent point that why would you have one of those buttons? I guess maybe if accidentally people who work there got stuck in those elevator things, there's no real explanation. That's my stretch explanation. But good point. Blue Room, you have Netflix, Shudder, Amazon Prime, and just signed up for Full Moon Features. Ooh, let me know how that Full Moon Features one is, Blue Room. I know they were offering like the free Puppet Master Blu-rays. Let me know how it is. I might sign up for it if it's worth it. According to Letterboxd, it is on both. You are right, Heather. Yes. Well, I couldn't tell you about Prime, but you are right about Shudder. I usually just rent movies on YouTube for $5 when it's not on streaming. Yeah, you can do that, Marshall. I haven't watched any movies through YouTube, honestly, but maybe I'll start doing that. Especially now, all I have is time pretty much when I'm not doing my teleworking. That is why I asked about the purge button at the beginning. Yeah, good point, Blue Room. Yeah, that purge button does not make a whole lot of sense. I'm kind of ashamed to say that I didn't really think about that when I was watching the movie. Or any time I've watched the movie, which is a lot. Well, not a lot, but a good amount. Full Moon has created a movie, Corona Zombies, and yes, it is about the current virus. Is it good? Probably not, because it seems like that was rushed. I mean, here's the thing, like, there's some Full Moon out there that I quite like. I like a lot of the Puppet Master. Even the Puppet Masters that aren't good have a certain fun factor to them. But I don't like all their stuff. Demonic Toys is fun. Okay, so we have one Sorry, I'm getting tired. We have one vote for Some Kind of Hate. There's a website called Just Watch. You can tell it what services you have, and it will show which movies are on there. Or you can check a movie to see if you can stream it. Oh, that is good to know, Heather. Thank you. That's super helpful. I'll have to check that out when I have these types of questions, so I don't have to be like, now let me check on my Netflix app. Now let me check on my Shudder app. Now let me go on my Xbox and check to see what's on Hulu. You know, all that. Oh, and Marshall uses it as well. I did not know about this, but you guys do. Cool. That's helpful. Awesome. Dig it. Okay, so unless I get other votes, I'm going to go with Some Kind of Hate for Uncle Pete. Because I know Uncle Pete, you threw it out there and were pretty animate about it last time. And based on that little bit that I saw last night, I was very intrigued with that film. And from what you said, Uncle Pete, it sounds like there's a lot we could talk about with that film. Kind of like Corona Zombies. Ben Grimm. Don't know who you are, but welcome. And glad that you can throw in your opinion on Corona Zombies. I'll vote for The Collector. Okay, Marshall votes for The Collector. Collector would be good. And this is the thing. If we don't do Some Kind of Hate or The Collector for the next one, we can just do it for the one after that. Because I'm going to try and do it. No promise here, but I'm going to try and do it like every other Saturday. We'll do the live stream. That's my goal. There's going to be a sequel next month involving the Tiger King. I don't want to hear about this Tiger King stuff. I listened to a podcast about the Tiger King like well over a year ago. So when people are now talking about it, I'm like, I'm not going to watch the show. Like, it's fine that everyone's watching it and they're talking about it, but they keep coming to me and saying, well, you should watch it. And I'm like, I already know the whole story. I listened to a podcast about it a long time ago. And they're like, yeah, but you should watch it. And I'm like, no, I shouldn't watch it. I already know the story. I don't need to. I like Some Kind of Hate more, so we'll vote for that one. Okay, Heather, cool. Tiger King, LOL. Yeah, Some Kind of Hate, Ben. Okay. Well, we will do Some Kind of Hate for the next one then. Okay? And then maybe we'll do The Collector for the one after that. So I will note this in my notes. So The Collector, 1 star against that one, and Some Kind of Hate. It's going to get 2 stars to indicate that's the next one. Okay. And then I still have some others on the list. If you guys want to throw out some ideas to go on the list for future considerations, you can do that right now. And we can also just kind of chit-chat a little bit. Otherwise, we can adjourn whatever you guys are feeling. Adjourn our horror movie club meeting, which is basically what I feel like this is, which is awesome. Okay, you're next as another one to consider. I'll put that on the list. I only saw that movie once. I enjoyed it enough. I remember there being a lot of buzz around You're Next. And then I watched it and I was like, eh. I was like, it's fine, but I'll put it on the list. Maybe that's another one where I just need to watch it again. Did that have A.J. Bowen in it? Who was A.J. Bowen in it? The guy who like left and then came back. How about we add to the list the scariest movie of all time, Romy and Michelle's high school reunion? Uncle Pete. I have not seen that movie, and I probably won't. So, but yeah, good one. Gotcha. All right, cool. I think Slender Man would be fun to watch as a group, mostly to rag on it. All right, I haven't seen it. I've heard it's just terrible, but we could go that route for one of the streams, just watching a really bad movie and then talking about why it's so bad. So I'll put it on the list. Yes, I have heard it was just... Ugh. Doesn't mean we'll necessarily do it, but I'll put it on the list for consideration so we can talk about it at some point. So thank you, Ben, for that recommend. All right, so it seems like things are kind of winding down, so I think I'm going to go ahead and sign off for now. It's been great talking about The Cabin in the Woods. I love this movie so incredibly much. Hopefully you guys had a really fun time with it. And, yeah, it looks like we're going to do some kind of hate for the next one. I'm excited about that one. Hopefully you guys are also excited about it. Uncle Pete likes the idea of watching a bad movie on purpose. Okay, we can make this happen. We can... Well, and that's another thing is we can do one of these so bad it's awesome movies. Like we already have on the list as well The Suckling, which I think Blue Room had brought up. Was it Blue Room who brought up The Suckling? We could do that at some point. It might be fun as a secondary topic after a normal discussion. Oh, okay. So yeah, because we probably wouldn't have as much stuff to talk about with a bad movie. So yeah, we could move it to a format of doing a good movie and a bad movie. So like the first hour we talk in depth about breaking down and analyzing a good movie or interesting movie, and then the second hour we just rag on a terrible movie. Yeah, I could get down with that. Not for the next one, but maybe considering after that. Might be fun as a secondary topic. Yeah, I read that. Take care, Carlin. See you in 2 weeks. Keep it brutal. Yes, keep it brutal, Uncle Pete. Have a good night. Get to you as well, Heather. In that case, Nightmare on Elm Street remake, since it was terrible. Yeah, it wasn't so good, Marshall. But thank you. I will put that on the list as well. Peace, everyone. Yep, everyone have a great night. Keep it brutal, and thank you very much for showing up to this. So until next time, everyone, go to sleep. Keep it brutal.